Hey guys, I'm here to talk about baking textures out from a high poly mesh down to a low poly mesh. And to begin, we're going to talk about how you get to that point, what you should have done with your models before you start with this. Here I have the cloth sim of my cowl for the Z-Friend superhero squad. These are retired heroes. And you can see it's very high polygon mesh. It's got over 30,000 faces. And so the first thing would be to extract a low poly model from this. Sometimes you start with a low poly model and model a high poly model. I actually probably would have done that, but I forgot to save the low poly model before collapsing this for cloth sim. Excuse me, I'm a little under the weather. And but I was able to extract a low poly mesh pretty simply, just using mesh, reduce, and I would set it to about 75%. And then also going through and selecting edge loops and deleting them with controlled delete, just to show you how that looks, which deletes the edges and the connected verts. And that's also a sign of why edge loops are important. It's not just because it looks good compared to triangles or n-gons. It actually has a lot of functionality reasons for 3D. A lot of these are very useful later on, especially for things like setting UV edges, setting weight painting for rigs, lots and lots of things. So have good topology, try and have quads instead of triangles, and have a good edge flow. So I reduced it, and I also occasionally used relaxation tools with the mesh tools sculpt geometry tool. And if you go into the options, it brings up a brush menu, and it has options like pull out, push in, smooth and relax. And so I would just go in with a decent sized brush and medium opacity and just smooth these polygons out a little bit. You have to be in object mode for it. And especially with the cloth sim, you can look at it on the high poly one and it gets all sorts of distortion problems. So that's how I would clean up my mesh before baking it. I might have overextended this, so I'm going to go in and fix that really fast. Just a couple of vertex grabs. I'll hit B to turn on Bezier select, or I don't know, brush select. And then if I hold the B key down and left click, you can see it draws out a murky. And it'll let me just this up a little bit. There we go. Doesn't have to be perfect. After that, I ended up unwrapping this using a cylinder unwrap. I went to create UVs, create cylindrical mapping, and that created, if we go to the UV texture editor, you can see how my seams look. And just to give you a demo of how I did that, you guys don't have to know all the best unwrapping secrets yet, but it is good to know. Eventually it's a very powerful thing to have your UVs unwrap correctly. So if I go to create UVs, I'll show you again with the cowl on the low poly mesh. If I isolate select on this, just show, isolate select, reselect. You can see I deleted the back faces of this because I didn't need them. I can now go mesh, or no, create UVs, cylindrical mapping, and this creates pretty crappy unwraps. What you want to do is click this little T icon, and this gives you transforms that you can change the node of that cylinder unwrap. So if I click on this, I go into the rotation tools, and now I can set this to something a little more accurate. Pardon me, I wanted the x-axis only. So I want this to be unwrapping it like this. And you can see I rotated it correct because the head is up top and the torso is below. I can go in and set that specifically to 90 degrees. Cool stuff. I'll also scale this up a bit. So I click on one of the scale buttons, and then on my Y scale I can get this so it unwraps a little closer to that. Now we are getting a problem area down here, and that's where it's good to know about different ways you can unwrap. Eventually, at least in the Blender and Max world, I don't totally remember how to do it in Maya, but you would use something called pelt mapping to set edges, and then when you unwrapped, it would specifically go to that. But I actually have sort of evolved away from that in my old age, and nowadays I actually prefer doing camera mapping lots and lots. So I would select these two polygons and go view. Now I want this edge right here. These ones are like diagonal, so if I go view align camera to polygon, I'll notice we're looking directly at that. View. Align camera to polygon. And now I can just select these, grow some selection like that, and now I can go create UVs based on camera. And you'll notice all those crappy ones that were getting squashed in the bottom of the cylinder mapping are now right here. I can rotate them, and I'm about to do some modeling tools on the fly, so pardon me if I get huge demo effect. But I believe now we can. I can select these and go polygon. There's probably something that's like so UV edges. Aha! Look at that. And take that demo effect. And it automatically drew these ones from this set of polygons that were correct to these ones over here. So that's a very bare bones UV tutorial. Now I can just move and select, scale them until they're like that. This is not perfect, but I think those are the faces back here, and they're not even going to be seen. The last thing I might want to do is select both of these, and let's go. Let's join these into a single mesh. So isolate select. And now I'm going to join these two meshes together. Oh, maybe I don't need to. I at least want to look at the UVs separately. These mannequin faces are not going to have huge detail. I expect they're mostly just going to be a big matte material, so I'm just sticking them right there in between this cal. And now these can basically export as a single object. So, sure. Let's go File, Export, Selection. And we're going to choose an FBX for our selection modification. So we want FBX, and I mentioned this in class, but the main thing you want to double check is your scale factor. So I am using meters. You can see that. Here, I'll cancel really fast. If I go to Display, or Window, Settings, Preferences, I've been modeling all of my stuff in real world scale, just to make sure I know what I'm doing. A lot of times people model in hundredth scale so they don't have to deal with this export graph later. But I have mine set to meter, and so I have to undo that when I export it, because when I'm baking, it's very hard for 3D programs to do real-world baking in massive scale. It'll try to use real-world coordinates, and so it's a much heavier process to bake from meters rather than centimeters, because you're dealing with 100 times as much raycasting. So it'll just not bake any ambient occlusion. So I'll select these and export selection as FBX. I had my settings, and I will set this to the desktop, just as poly. Okay, cool. It was mostly just important that I had my UVs unwrapped before that. And then I'll select my high poly stuff. And I guess this is the same one on both. So I'll select these and say File, Export Selection, FBX. Again, no automatic. Convert it to centimeters, so it's going to turn it from meters to centimeters. And I'll set this as my high poly. Cool. In the next video, we're going to fire up X normals and bake some maps after these, and then set them up in our Maya environment.